Rosemary oil beat minoxidil. That is the sentence. You have seen it on Reddit, on TikTok, on the back of a $12 bottle, and probably from someone in your family who is trying to be helpful. And there is a real study behind it. Published, peer-reviewed, 100 men, 6 months, randomized. It exists. I have it open right now. But here is what nobody does. Nobody reads past the abstract. Because when you actually read that paper, the methods, the dosing, the endpoint, the confidence intervals, the headline falls apart and something more interesting climbs out of the wreckage. The study does not say rosemary oil beats minoxidil. It also does not say rosemary oil is useless, which is what the debunkers claim. It says a third thing, a weirder thing. And that third thing is the only part that should change what you put on your head. I'm going to walk you through the actual paper, line by line on screen so you can check every number yourself. Then we'll do the same to peppermint, pumpkin seed, castor, and onion. And at the end, I'll tell you exactly what I'd use and what I'd skip. This is balding out loud. I don't sell hair products, I don't take supplement sponsorships, and I read the studies so you don't have to. Let's start with why this specific paper has so much power. It is 1990-something years of hair loss advice compressed into one appealing idea, that the natural thing is as good as the drug thing without the side effects. That idea is emotionally enormous. If you are 26 and terrified of finasteride, or you tried minoxidil and hated the shedding, or you just don't want to be on a pharmaceutical for the next 40 years, that idea is a door out. So the study gets shared as a permission slip, not as evidence, as permission. And the second reason is structural. There are roughly 4 decent human trials on essential oils for pattern hair loss. 4. Compare that to minoxidil, which has hundreds, or finasteride, which has tens of thousands of patient years behind it. When a field is that thin, one paper becomes the whole field. It gets cited into oblivion, quoted by people who never opened it, and eventually it stops being a study and becomes a fact. That is what happened here. So let's unhappen it. The paper is Panahi and colleagues, published in Skinned in 2015, Volume 13, Issue 1, pages 15 through 21. Title: Rosemary oil versus minoxidil 2% for the treatment of androgenetic alopecia, a randomized comparative trial. On screen right now is the title page. Pause it if you want. Design: 100 men with androgenetic alopecia. Randomized into 2 arms. One arm got rosemary oil, applied to the scalp twice daily. The other arm got minoxidil 2% solution, also twice daily. 6 months. Assessments at baseline, 3 months and 6 months. The primary outcome was hair count in a standardized microphotographed area of the scalp. That is a legitimate endpoint. That is how the real minoxidil and finasteride trials measure things too. Credit where it's due, the design is not junk. Results: the version everyone quotes. At 6 months, both groups had significantly more hair than they started with. And the difference between the 2 groups was not statistically significant. Now, read that again. Not statistically significant asterisk between groups asterisk. That is the entire basis for rosemary beat minoxidil. It didn't beat it. It failed to be shown different from it. Those are not the same sentence, and the gap between them is where this whole video lives. Here is the first thing that should have stopped the internet cold. Minoxidil 2%. 2% minoxidil is the women's strength. The standard men's over-the-counter formulation is 5%. And the head-to-head trials on that comparison are not subtle. 5% solution produces meaningfully more hair count than 2% in men, with the 5% arm pulling ahead progressively over the second half of a year. So the comparator in the Rosemary study is not the treatment men actually use. It is a deliberately weaker version of it. Imagine I told you a new painkiller performed as well as ibuprofen, and then you found out we dosed the ibuprofen at half strength. You would not conclude the new drug is as good as ibuprofen. You would conclude the trial was designed in a way that made it easy to draw. I want to be fair here because fair is the whole point of this channel. Using 2% is not automatically dishonest. There are real reasons 2% solution is cheaper, it's better tolerated, and in some countries it's what's on the shelf. But it does mean the result cannot be extended to 5%, and every single person who quotes this study extends it to 5%. Second problem, and this one is more technical, so stay with me because it matters enormously and almost nobody explains it. No statistically significant difference is not evidence of equivalence. It is the absence of evidence of difference. Those sound identical. They are opposites. If you run a small study or a noisy one, you will fail to find a difference between almost any two things. 50 men per arm is small. Hair counts in a micro area bounce around a lot between visits. Hair cycles, plucking, photographic alignment, the person doing the counting. Put small numbers together with a noisy measurement, and a real difference of, say, 15 or 20 hairs per square centimeter could easily hide inside the noise. The way you prove two treatments are actually equal is a non-inferiority trial. You pre-specify how much worse the new thing is allowed to be, you power the study to detect that margin, and then you show the confidence interval sits inside it. That is a completely different, much more expensive study design. This study is not that. It is a comparative trial that came out ambiguous. There's one more wrinkle. Both arms improved from baseline, but there was no placebo arm. No vehicle-only group. So we can't cleanly separate the treatment effect from regression to the mean, from seasonal hair cycling, or from the well-documented fact that people who enroll in a hair study start being gentler with their hair. Here's the part I promised. The finding in that paper that actually holds up. Scalp itching. At 6 months, itching was significantly more common in the Minoxidil group than the Rosemary group. That is the one comparison in the study that reached significance in a clean direction. Not hair counts, tolerability. And tolerability is not a footnote in hair loss. It is the whole ballgame. The single biggest predictor of whether topical minoxidil works for you is whether you are still using it in month 18, and the number one reason people stop is that their scalp is flaking, itching, and irritated. Most of that irritation is not the minoxidil molecule at all. It's the propylene glycol carrier in the solution formulation. So the honest, defensible, useful reading of the Rosemary paper is this: it is weak evidence about growth and moderate evidence about comfort. Which reframes the entire question. The question is not, should I replace minoxidil with rosemary oil? The question is whether something in this category can help you tolerate the treatment that actually has the evidence. Hold that thought. We're coming back to it. Let's give rosemary its fair hearing, because the mechanism is not nothing. Rosemary contains carnosic acid and a compound called 12-O-methylcarnosic acid. There's Japanese work, Murata and colleagues in Phytotherapy Research, 2013, showing rosemary leaf extract inhibited 5-alpha reductase activity in a cell assay, and that topical application promoted hair regrowth in mice made to lose hair with testosterone. 5-alpha reductase is the enzyme finasteride blocks. So the proposed mechanism is not mystical. It's the same target as the actual drug. But look at what tier of evidence that is. On screen, an enzyme assay in a dish and a mouse. Every failed hair drug in history looks spectacular in a mouse. Mouse hair cycles synchronously in waves, which means almost anything that mildly irritates mouse skin can push a wave of follicles from resting into growing, and you get a dramatic photo. Human scalp follicles cycle independently and asynchronously. The mouse model is famous for producing results that evaporate in people. And there's a dose problem. The concentration that inhibited the enzyme in a dish is not obviously the concentration reaching your dermal papilla from a few drops of diluted oil rubbed on the skin. Nobody has measured that. There is no pharmacokinetic data for topical rosemary in human scalp. None. So, plausible mechanism, real preclinical signal, no human confirmation of the mechanism at all. Peppermint oil is the second one you'll see everywhere, and it comes from a single study, O and colleagues, Toxicological Research, 2014. 3% peppermint oil in jojoba, applied to shaved mice for 4 weeks. And it did beat minoxidil 3% in that model: more follicles, deeper follicles, thicker dermal layer, higher IGF-1 expression. The photos are genuinely striking. It is a mouse study. C57 black 6 mice, the classic depilation-induced anagen model. Exactly the model I just told you produces effects that don't survive translation. There is, as of today, no human randomized trial of topical peppermint oil for androgenetic alopecia. Not a small one, not a bad one. 0. I want to be precise about what I'm saying because the debunker crowd overshoots here too. No human trial does not mean doesn't work, it means unknown. Unknown is an honest place to stand. What is not honest is a product page citing a mouse study as if it were clinical proof, and that is essentially the entire peppermint hair oil market. Also worth knowing, peppermint at 3% is a meaningful irritant on human skin for a lot of people. Menthol produces a cooling sensation that gets misread as it's working. It isn't a mechanism. It's a nerve receptor. Pumpkin seed oil deserves separate treatment because it is the only one in this category with a real, human, placebo-controlled, randomized trial. Cho and colleagues, Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine, 2014. 76 men with androgenetic alopecia, randomized to 400 milligrams of pumpkin seed oil per day or placebo. 24 weeks. Results: the treatment group had about a 40% increase in hair count. Placebo group about 10%. That gap is statistically significant, and self-reported improvement scores went the same direction. That is by a distance the best evidence in this entire video. So 3 caveats and they matter. 1. It's oral. Capsules. This is not the oil you rub on your scalp, and the study says nothing about topical use. 2. It was conducted with involvement from parties with a commercial interest in the ingredient, and it has never been independently replicated in 12 years. In a field where replication failure is the norm, 12 years without a second trial is a signal. 3. The proposed mechanism is 5-alpha reductase inhibition from phytosterols, which is the same mechanism claimed for saw palmetto, and saw palmetto's human data is considerably weaker than its reputation. If the mechanism were as strong as claimed, you'd expect the effect to show up more consistently across the whole phytosterol category. It doesn't. Fast round. These get sold hard and have essentially no evidence for pattern hair loss. Castor oil. The claim is ricinoleic acid. There is no human trial of castor oil for androgenetic alopecia. What there is in the dermatology literature is a documented phenomenon called acute hair felting, hair irreversibly matting into a solid mass, sometimes requiring the mass to be cut out. Castor oil's viscosity is a repeat character in those case reports. Onion juice. There is a real study, Sharkey and Aloe Beatty, Journal of Dermatology, 2002, and it showed impressive regrowth. For alopecia areata. That is an autoimmune condition with a different mechanism, a high spontaneous remission rate, and it responds to things that do nothing for pattern loss. Citing it for male pattern baldness is a category error. Coconut oil. Good evidence for reducing protein loss from the hair shaft. It genuinely penetrates the cortex. That's a hair quality benefit, not a growth benefit. Your existing hair breaks less. No new hair. Biotin. Unless you have a genuine biotin deficiency, which is rare, supplementation does nothing for your hair. What it reliably does is interfere with lab immunoassays, including thyroid panels and troponin, the heart attack marker. Stop it before blood work. Before I give you my actual protocol, I need to kill one idea because it's the reason people end up worse off. The idea is that natural equals gentle. That the trade you're making when you choose an oil over a drug is less effectiveness for more safety. That trade is not real, and here's why. An essential oil is not a plant. It's a concentrate. Steam distilling rosemary leaves gives you a liquid that can be 50 to 100 times more concentrated in the active aromatic compounds than the plant itself. That is a pharmacologically active preparation. We just don't regulate it like one. Which brings us to the actual asymmetry. Minoxidil is a drug. Every bottle of it in a regulated market has to contain what the label says at the strength the label says, tested. Essential oils are cosmetics. Independent testing of retail essential oils routinely finds adulteration, cheaper oils cut in, synthetic fragrance compounds substituted, wildly variable concentrations of the actual active. In a category where the entire theory of action rests on a specific compound at a specific concentration, you have no way to know what's in your bottle. Then there's the irritation itself, which people consistently underrate. Contact dermatitis from essential oils is common enough that it's a standard entry on dermatology patch test panels. Linalool and limonene, present in most of these oils, oxidize on contact with air and become considerably more sensitizing as the bottle ages. So the bottle that was fine in month 1 can be the bottle that gives you a reaction in month 8. In an inflamed scalp sheds. Telogen effluvium from scalp inflammation is a real, documented pathway. which produces the worst possible outcome in this whole story. Someone quits the treatment that works, switches to the oil, develops dermatitis, sheds from the dermatitis, concludes their hair loss is accelerating, and panics. I have watched that exact sequence play out in the comments of this channel more than once. So when someone tells you the natural option is the safe option, the honest answer is, it's the unregulated option. Sometimes that's fine. It is never automatically safer.